Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to do something that I've never done before, but I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and that is dig into some antique lenses. These are Takumar lenses, which quite possibly, if not certainly, have radioactive glass. So use with caution. The one we're going to be disassembling and cleaning up today is this Super-Takumar 55mm f1.8. I'll go ahead and open up the aperture here so you can see just how much glass there is here. There's a lot of glass, and it has a beautiful golden yellow tint to it, which is kind of a trademark of, or a result of, the radioactive glass. Not all radioactive glass goes yellow, and not all yellowed glass is radioactive, but these lenses is where those parts of the Venn diagram cross. A lens we're going to be looking at definitely in a future video is this SMC Takumar 50mm f1.4. This one has some pretty bad fungusing in it. I mean, it still takes decent photos, but it definitely needs some cleaning on the inside. The construction of these two lenses is quite different. This one, I believe, is a lot more simple than this one, which is why I will be digging into this one first and not this one. So we're going to set this one aside and come back to it another day. Again, the two problems that this lens has is, one, the lens elements inside are kind of dirty. They're not terrible. I mean, it probably doesn't need to be cleaned, but if I'm going in to fix the second problem, I may as well do the lens elements at the same time. Because the second problem is that the aperture ring is pretty sticky. If you work it back and forth a little bit, it gets better, but it's really not perfect, and if you leave it sit for any period of time, it stiffens right up again. So that's why I want to remove these, the focus ring, the index ring, and then the aperture ring, to kind of clean that up and re-grease it. But otherwise, this lens is in really good condition. The aperture is dry, and it is very responsive. And overall, the quality of the glass, like, there's no major scratches. It just is a little dirty. So the tools that I'm going to be using today, and I may not use all of them, but there may be tools I'll add, but this is what I'm going to start with, is just a pointing tool. That's more of a visual aid, a dental tool, a tweezers, a small 2mm flathead or slotted screwdriver. I may not need this, but a soft brush, a lens poofer. Now, this actually used to be a turkey baster, but with my 3D printer, I was able to print a custom nozzle. I have two sizes that I made, and all I had to do was just model up the exterior dimensions of this part, and it fits in really, really good. So that's why I love having a 3D printer, is you can make, custom manufactured parts. And this was $2. Next will be, these are some rubber grommets that I'll be using to take apart the lens screws. And if you put some alcohol on these to clean them up, they get really sticky. And to kind of aid me with those, I have several different sizes of pieces of aluminum here. These are things I lapped back in the day, just a turned piece of aluminum. And these are a couple old pistons out of some chainsaws. And, if you couple these up, it makes a really nice, easy wrench tool to get the lens elements and screws out. Next, I've got a couple dishes here, one to put some solvent in, and then one just to cover up lenses so they don't get dust on them while they're sitting. A syringe with some alcohol in it. I've got some lint-free cotton patches, Q-tips, an assortment of lens cleaners, and then also some alcohol wipes if I want to use those as well. And that's pretty much everything. Oh, one more thing. I was able to get some, this is just from the plumbing section of the hardware store. This is a 6-inch by 6-inch piece of rubber sheet for gasket material to make custom gaskets. This also is very sticky. So if I get to a point where these aren't going to work for me, or I have a couple other special tricks up my sleeve with that, I can make some custom shaped gasket or custom shaped gripping tools with this. So I think without further ado, let's get straight into it. The first step here is to remove this nameplate, and for that you just use one of the grommets and just screw this off. And I will set that aside. So at this point, you can now see that there are 6 slotted screws, 2 over here, 2 over here, and 2 over here. And these are the only screws that hold the entire optical assembly in. Now, it is very important that we make index marks of where everything lines up as we go, because if you don't get things lined up just right, where your focus range will be miscalibrated. So infinity, the infinity setting will not be at a true infinity. And when you try and get to your close range, the minimum focus, it's going to be a little bit off, as well as it will mess with the aperture setting, because the rotation of this will affect that. And it looks like the screw here for that is already a little loose, which isn't good, but it might help us in the future. So something you want to do is make little scratches with the dental tool. First, you want to set the lens at infinity, and we'll go to wide open aperture, and you want to make an index mark on, well, you know what? I think we have to take this plate off first. So let's do that. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this is not something that I've done before. However, there is a wonderful YouTube channel run by a guy named Kenneth, and he's from Denmark. And he does amazing vintage lens repair tutorials. And so that's where I kind of got to see the best version of a breakdown of one of these lenses. So I'm kind of going off of his procedure. And now at this point, this ring right here should come out. If we go to the farthest focus point, it'll make it a little easier. It should come right off. Should. Yep, there we go. A little sticky, come on. There we go. And we will set that aside. Now at this point, we have 2 directions we could go. We can either go ahead and remove the lens assembly, or we could go straight into trying to clean up the aperture. I think it'd be best to do the lens assembly first and at least get it out of the way. It'll make the lens a lot easier to handle, and we'll be less likely to scratch the glass. So what I'm going to do is go back to infinity and set the aperture to 16, so all the way closed. And you want to make sure that you are in the manual setting. All right, so you can see the aperture is fully closed. And this is where you want to start making some witness marks. And make sure that someone hasn't already been in there and made their own witness marks. But where we want to make them is in line with this diamond and where infinity is. And we're going to make scratch marks pretty much from here all the way down and throughout. So that way we know exactly where everything should line up when we go to reassemble this. Because again, that is pretty important. And it is not a big deal to put scratches on these because no one's going to see it, and it is better for reassembly. So here we go. Might want to pick a sharper tool. I'll use one of my O-ring picks here. Might be a little sharper. There we go. Just a very small mark. And that lines up with the diamond pretty well. So now our lens group is marked to the diamond. And then something else to note here is that the screws that hold in the lens assembly are on the left of the two screw mounts for each of these posts. The screws that hold in this cover plate go on the right. So looking at this by eye now, I've actually marked this line closer to in line with this number 4, and that's okay. It doesn't really matter where you put it or where the reference is, so long as you know where it goes. So I'm going to remember that this line is supposed to go closer to this side of the number 4. So now I will go back in with a screwdriver. Again, this is a 2mm. And these screws were quite a bit tighter. And it does appear that these screws also came with a washer. So it is very important not to lose that. I just made a little bit of a mistake there. I moved my focus point, or I moved the focus ring a little bit. You don't want to do that. You want to keep everything steady. And you want to keep everything in relationship to everything else the same. All right, so I have those 3 out. And now the lens assembly should come right out of the lens. So this is now the body with the focus ring assembly and the aperture assembly. And this is the entire lens group. Now this one looks a fair bit different. So this is a much different design to the one on Kenneth's channel. His has a post that comes up out of here, like a stainless or an aluminum post, where this has a bent piece of sheet metal. Very interesting. There's a little bit of oil on this, which is good in a way, but we want to minimize that because now I have oil on my fingers. I'm going to just try and wipe off as much of this oil as I can. That way it doesn't make its way into the Aperture blades over time. Okay, so we are going to set that aside. And so next, what we will do... Sorry for that grunting noise, that was my dog. So we have our focus ring here, and this focus ring should pull straight off of the front. In fact, I'm going to take this wipe, same piece of cotton, wipe out the oil that's in this body here. Also try and clean up some of the dirt. All right, that's a little better. I see. So there's another set of 3 screws in here that are holding on this focus ring. So still set it at infinity and at the F16 setting. I'm going to try and reach in there. Hopefully my screwdriver will reach deep enough and get these 3 screws out. I've got just enough reach maybe. Having a non-interchangeable screwdriver would be really beneficial for this. All right, there's 1 screw. All right, there's the second one. There's a lot of dirt caught in this thing. But then again, it is like, what, 50 years old or 60 years old at this point, so kind of makes sense. These also appear to have little brass washers on them. The slot in this last screw seems to be a little shallower than the others. There we go. Yeah, it's definitely shallower. It's very hard to get a grip on. And there it comes out. So now, with it still set at infinity, should come right off. Okay, I see. It's interesting. The steel band here has come unglued, which is not a very good thing because that could come off. It's actually getting a little worse. So I'll make a note here that the infinity mark, oh yep, see, it is coming off. I might have to re-glue this now. This infinity mark is right at this edge, at that stop point. So yeah, I'll use some adhesive remover and clean that up and then try and re-glue this on, which should not be too difficult. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. All right, well, we can set that aside. And now there is a mark here already for where the that focus infinity point is. So I'm going to go back to my cotton swab here and try and clean up some of this old gunk. And look at all that. This is definitely going to improve the smoothness of this lens just by doing this. All right, so I think I got it back. I shouldn't have spun that there. That was a bad idea. But what I can do is, since that's just really soft brass, I've got it where I think it should be. Oh no, it isn't brass, is it? That's gotta be brass. It's harder than it looks. All right, so I've just inscribed a small mark there to match up. So now if I turn this, no, it makes a stop there. Okay. I know I can match it back up. So the next step will be to remove the index ring, and there are 3 even smaller set screws here that you do not need to remove entirely. You just need to loose them off a couple turns. Let's see. Yeah, that one should work. So I'm going to go to a smaller 1mm slotted screwdriver and just back each of these off. Just a turn or two. And that one was not even remotely tight. Neither was this one. It feels like it has a waxy sort of paste in it. Those may be supposed to help keep it locked in. So let's see if, yeah, this one might have to come out a little bit more. All right, and now that's coming off. So at this point, I think I'm going to wet down this cotton patch here with a little bit of alcohol. I'm going to wipe this down. Try and get some of this old grease and some of the dirt off of it. Cotton swab might also be helpful here. All right, so the next step to get this aperture ring off, the set screw ball is under the number 16 right now. So if you pull this forward, make sure you have your thumb ready to catch the ball if it happens to spring out. This screw here might be in our way. I believe it is, but I don't want to take that out yet because I don't know precisely what that's going to do. Also, if you're trying to declick one of these, this is how you would do it. No, I shouldn't have to remove that screw. I think it'll clear. But I'm not seeing... Okay, the ball is over on this side for this. And there goes the ball. I'll set that one up there. And now the aperture ring is off. So now this is as disassembled as it needs to go. And we're going to clean up this. We're going to clean up both of these. And then we're going to clean up this. So let's start with the inside of the aperture ring. You can see all that gray stuff, that gray residue. That is metal shavings that have been taken off over the years of use. Mostly, I'm going to guess from right where those teeth are. That's what gives you all the clicks for the aperture settings. I'm considering having this one declicked because it really isn't that difficult to get to this point to put the ball detent back in. And this stuff really doesn't need much for grease. It really doesn't. Just enough to keep things from grinding and corroding is really all it needs. And I'm not saying that because I'm an expert in this. This is the first time I've ever taken apart one of these lenses, as I've said. But just my understanding of mechanics in general, this isn't a super high wear component. So I wouldn't imagine it would need, tons of grease. And it seems that the general consensus of people I've watched restore these lenses, less is more when it comes to the grease. So let's get this ring here a little cleaner too. And there's still a bit of a stickiness and tackiness to the outer portion of this housing. So here is the what is called the helicoil for the focus system. I could remove this. I would have to take, because it's a multi-start thread, I would have to take very careful count of where the threads come apart, like which start on the thread goes to which start on, or which start on this inner portion goes to which start in the outer portion. Otherwise it will not end up right. And I mean, if a little bit of trial and error should get you to the right spot. So you know what, I think I'm right here. I don't see any danger. I will clean up the grease on this. Well, I think I just screwed myself with that one. As long as I can get these two back together, and it wants to go back in, okay. So this portion here, because there are 3 of them, this part that goes right next to this slot needs to go in line with the M for manual, and then it comes out. So I'm going to clean up this, and I'm going to get a separate dish and just kind of soak that in some of the isopropyl. Well, nah, disregard that. I'll just use a rag. Now, a little bit of stickiness in both of the controls for the focus and the aperture can be good, because it means when you let go of the lens, it won't just slide around wherever it wants. But having too much stiction also makes it very difficult to operate, and will probably lead to you being behind the focus on a moving target if you're trying to do that. Although that's probably not the best idea with a manual focus lens these days, when you can just as easily get an autofocus lens that will track subjects very well. All right, I think that's cleaned up as well as it needs to be. Now I will be a little more careful with this focus ring, because I do not want to move it from its current position. So I think I'm just going to do the best I can with where it's sitting. And then I can just reapply a little bit of grease later. Okay, I'm happy with that. Another tool I just went to grab are some toothpicks, and these can be useful to try and move around the locking rings on the lenses, as well as in this case I'm going to use it to apply the grease to the threads. Now I don't have the right grease for this, and I don't even know what the right grease would be, but I've got a high quality mineral based grease here that I'm going to use. I'm just going to use it very, very sparingly. Okay. That should be enough. So let me find where it says M, and I found this part of the flange where it has the groove. I'll slot that into place and then turn, I guess, this brass focus nut a little sideways there. Now if I don't get the right start on the first try, I can always readjust and try again, because it's not wanting to go in quite straight. There we go. Ooh, that is a lot smoother. All right, so when it bottomed out, my mark is not over here, it is over here. So that means that I am off a little bit. So what I'm going to do is move it back by one start and then bring it back down in, and that should make it line up. Okay, so I went one too far, so now it's over here, even though it had been over here. So let's go all the way back out again. Come in a little bit. There we go. No, that was the same spot again. All right, I'm gonna pause here. It's just gonna be trial and error of this for about the next 5 or 10 minutes, so I'll catch you in just a little bit. All right, I got this back on and lined up. It turns out that I was incorrect about which side or which way around the inner ring went. So just take a note of that. Whatever I said before, just reverse it. Not a big deal. So now we're going to clean up the focus ring. There's a lot of green in there. It must be corrosion from that brass nut. Hopefully this rubbing alcohol will be enough to dissolve the solvent, or dissolve the adhesive that's on here. Seems to be doing an okay job so far. But if I have to go to something like acetone, I will. Yeah, I'll probably have to go to something a little stronger. So let me try this. This is a more aggressive adhesive remover. Let's see if this will do the trick. Now, the reason why I'm calling this adhesive remover and not like acetone or naphtha or any other solvent is because I don't actually know which one it is. Yeah, that's not doing too great of a job either. So I'll also have to use it in here. That's just a very thin piece of aluminum. And do recall that it needs to go this way around, like so. So I'll probably be using super glue because it's what I have right now. However, probably a horse-based glue would be more appropriate for something this age. All right, I think we're ready to start putting things back together. You know, being declicked, that feels well damped enough to me that I will leave the screw out of it. And all this does is, if you see right here, there's a fork there, and you're just moving that fork. And that fork it grabs onto this plate and moves that plate to open and close the aperture. Very neat stuff. This stuff is very simple. So I think what I'm going to do is just add the lightest touch of grease to all these components, and then just use a cotton swab here to spread it around. That way everything has at least a new light coating of grease to prevent any corrosion for the steel parts and any wear, especially for the soft parts. But I don't want to put on so much that it just attracts more dirt and grinds everything up anyway. All right, that should be adequate. So let's make sure our marks are lined back up here, which they are. And then we need to get F16 lined back up with our mark. There we go. And I want to get this lined back up And this is the most critical one to get lined up, because this is the kind of the master reference for everything else in the lens. So you want to have a good grip on that, and then carefully turn these set screws back in without moving too much stuff around. All right, that has a reasonable enough feel to it. Still a little sticky, but nowhere near as bad as it was before. I think the only way I'd be able to fix it from here is to disassemble the mechanism that adjusts this fork, and that's just going way beyond what I'm really comfortable with and what I'm familiar with. So as much as I would like to get into the lens group next, I'm going to take a quick aside and re-glue on this strip. I'll probably do that off camera to save time, and when we come back it should be glued on and we'll get into the lens group. All right, I'm back. That actually was surprisingly fast. I just used some Loctite super glue, and it cured up really quickly, and it seems to be holding well. So now this can go back on, and if I did everything right, with this set to infinity at the correct point, everything should line up with the screws as well. Okay, now that we've got that line back up, we can go ahead and reinstall the 3 screws that hold the focus ring to the focus nut. And for this, we can go back to that 2mm slotted screwdriver tip and try and get these tiny, tiny screws back in there. You will have to forgive me if you can't see much of this, because I can barely see it myself. Let's see if I have better luck with this magnetic extension. At least to get them started. Yeah. Got one. Now it is important not to tighten anything down too much right away. You still want this to be able to turn free until you get them all in. Then you can set it to where you need it to be. And then after that you can get them tightened down. But these screws are so small. Get tightened down doesn't really mean tight, it's just snugged. All right, there's number 2. Last one here, and this is the one that was the thinnest. And also the one that I buggered up the most trying to get it out. The other ones stayed pretty good, but this one got a little gnarled. There we go. All right, so now they're all 3 in. You want to set it to the infinity setting again. And this would also be how you adjust your infinity if you notice that your lens isn't quite getting focused all the way out. So there's that one at least touching. That one's touching. And then that one. And then to get these snugged up, you really don't have to go very far. Right there, okay. So now, there we go, very nice. Very smooth. That's a lot a lot more well damped than it was before, and it's smoother throughout the entire range than it was before. Now, one problem is, and this is completely my fault, is I got the infinity, I glued it a little bit too far off counterclockwise when viewed in this direction. So it should be over here, but it's over there, which, okay, not a huge deal. I can always maybe try and fix that in the future. Aperture ring. I still think that internal mechanism is going to need some work, but overall I'm pretty happy with that. So I think we're going to be done with that portion now, and now we can get into the more critical part, which is the optical assembly. So I'm going to wash my hands again to get any oils off, and I'm also going to clean off this this workstation to get it cleaned and ready for the optics. Okay, I'll be back momentarily. All right, now this is where things get a little more difficult and a little more critical. It's the optical assembly. So thankfully this first element was already a little loose. So I'm going to carefully remove this front ring. And I'm going to set it over here. And now this first element should fall right out. I'm going to get another patch, and I'm going to have it soaking in some rubbing alcohol. The purpose for having the patch in there is just so that the lens does not scrape against the bottom plastic. It just makes scratches a little less likely. Come on, get out of there. All right, this is where a lens sucker would be really handy. I do not happen to have one of those to hand. I don't want to just start picking at the edge. Let's get another patch here. That is a stubborn lens. All right, well, let's assume that it's going to want to stay stubborn, and I will get one of my grommets and one of these pistons and try and remove the next ring. I think rubber is definitely the way to go when disassembling these, and I'm even going to say that with minimal to no experience, because using the wrench tools, while sometimes necessary, make damaging the lens elements much more likely, where it's really hard to ruin these pieces of glass with the rubber. Now, I do know that this is a single start thread, so it doesn't really matter how this thing lines back up. And then we can remove this rear piece, probably with this same tool. If I stretch it a little bit. I can get this back nut off. Okay, well there's that. So this is the rearmost element, and it went in like this. So this is a convex concave lens, and it actually looks to be in nearly perfect condition. So I will leave it as is and put it underneath the dust cover. Okay, this next element, the frontmost one, I'm not sure why it's not wanting to come out, even with a fair bit of persuasion. This is 2 pieces of glass, because you can see there is a second nut right in there. It's on the verge of coming out. And there we go. So this lens is by far the dirtiest, and I'm going to let this one soak. You know, I even see just the faintest hint of fungus starting on this. So you're not going to be able to pick that up. And this one goes plain side back. I shouldn't drop these. And convex side forward. I will simply drop that in there to soak while I figure out how to get this last element out. So this is where like a toothpick can come in handy. If it's loose enough, you can just push it off with one of these with almost no worry of damaging anything. But I don't think that's going to work for me today, and that grommet is too big. That one's too small. That's too big. That's pretty much all I've got. But here's the bright side. This is the last lens element in this section, so I can get to the front and the back as is. But this one's looking exceptionally clean. So I'll put that one under the glass as well, or under this container. While this one is still soaking, let's go to the next element. That would be the back group. So this is going to be a little bit more problematic because I have this thing in the way. But I will try and use this grommet here and the smallest piston I have. And it looks like this inner ring came loose. Yes, it did. To me, that's actually a good thing, because this inner ring is going to be harder to remove than the outer one in general, because there's just less access to it. So this is going to be the rear element. And that one is very yellowed. The rear glass on these is more radioactive than the front glass. and it tends to go more yellow. So that was the rear of the front. This is the inner part of the rear group. So that's going to be pretty difficult to get off, I think, unless I can use this trick again. I don't see anywhere where they would have put some thread lock on that. I'll be very careful not to damage the aperture mechanism. Oh, there we go. And now this is the rest of the rear group. I can definitely see some fungus on that, and I believe you can too. And then this is the aperture mechanism. So that doesn't need to be touched, but this does. And I don't think this comes off any further, because I think this is a fused element. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, there should be 2 in here. Oh, yep. And that just came off very, very easily by hand. So there's our cemented elements. I may be miscounting these, because there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This should be a 7 element. No, I take that back. I'm getting this one confused with, because this is the 55 1.8. This is a 6 element 5 group lens, not a 7 element 6 group lens. So that makes sense now. I wish I had some plastic tweezers with me. But as it is, I will gently prop this out and then grab it with a cloth. And we'll set that down here. And then I will let the rearmost element soak. So I got to remember the front group goes into this. Now the one problem with the way that I'm doing this is that I do not have any gloves. So the oil from my fingers, even though I've washed my hands very well, will dissolve into the rubbing alcohol, and then the rubbing alcohol then will go onto the lens, and then when it dries it will have a haze from the oil on my fingers. Part of it is, I think, just rubbing alcohol is not the cleanest way to clean these lenses. But that's why I have those other special lens wipes that I can use. Because at least right there, that is clean enough until I'm ready to use the lens wipes on them. So that sits in there perfectly. There's a little bit of fungus right here at this corner. Oh no. Alright, so that black stuff that just came off was what looks to be the adhesive that goes onto this nut. So I'll have to be extra careful with this now. It's possible that this rubbing alcohol kind of dissolved some of that adhesive. And the front element there is perfect, so I'm just gonna let that sit there. So that's it. Now I just have to wipe off this one. And then use a lens cloth, like a proper lens cloth on all of them. And then it should, it's a little disappointing there. It should all be ready to go after that. And on this one, there's a slightly flatter side and then a slightly more curved side. That flatter side goes backwards. I apologize. It would go convex side to the, like towards the sensor of the camera. All right, so I am ready now to put this back together. I'm going to try one of these wipes that is for anti-fog and anti-static as well. At least that's what it says. I don't necessarily believe that claim, but that is the claim. So that is for the rear group. And that is for the front portion. So this should go in like that. And have that screw on here. You want that to be just snug. Okay. And then we'll go for the rearmost element. drop into place right there. And we can put the ring back on. And we can use our toothpick to get it screwed on. And we can get that one, since it was so easy, we can get that one tightened down properly. With the grommet later. All right, now use the grommet for this and get that snug down in the body. Use the smaller grommet and get that inside one snug down. All right, I see one hang up already. We're gonna have to disassemble this. Can you see that black fiber in there? Right there. So that's not a big deal. I know right where that one came from. If you recall, some of that disintegrating black coating, which I believe is for anti-reflection inside the lens elements, was starting to come off. It came off of this ring. Okay. We're going to want to keep that face down. Okay, so that one is perfect. I'm not going to even touch it. This one is perfect. I'm not even going to touch it. So that can go. Where's my plastic stick? Right here. That one needs to sit back down in here. Just like that. So this back ring can go back on. Again, just snug there. I see a blemish. Yes, I do, but I don't think it's worth doing anything about right now. Okay, now the front element. This is going to be the dirtiest one. And I'm not so worried about getting the front of the front element perfect because I can always access that from outside, you know, once the lens is actually fully assembled. Yeah, I think this one is getting too dry to be useful. I will open up another one. It can be very difficult to tell if what you're seeing is on the front side or the back side of the lens. But I think that's as good as I'm going to be able to get this. So I will drop that in. And there we go. That is all it takes to clean out the optical assembly in a Super-Takumar 55mm 1.8. Very simple. I got my handprint all over the back element again. That's all right, because it can be very, very easily cleaned. So now we can line this back up with the fork. And that falls into place. And then make sure that the marks line up just right, as they do. And now we can put in the screws again. Remember, these screws are the ones that need to go to the the left-hand side. Make one final check that the alignment is just right. And it is. Give all the screws a slight tighten. Again, just snug is all these need. Right there. And let's do these last 3 screws. All right, and the final step is to put on the nameplate. And there we go. Small smudge again on the back from my hand, but other than that, that is much cleaner. And I actually really like having that declicked aperture ring. And this feels so much smoother and more consistent throughout its whole travel, the focus, that is. So I'll take a couple sample photos for after, and then I'll flash before and after photos for you. But that is it. That's all it takes. I know it's a long video. I'm planning not to cut a whole lot out just so you can understand how much time it really takes. Probably about, what, an hour and a half, 2 hours, with zero real-world experience, just watching some YouTube videos from some excellent YouTube makers, primarily, again, Kenneth out of Denmark. Superb videos and tutorials by him. So, all right, that's all I got for this video. We'll be doing this lens next. Hopefully when I have some gloves and, you know, a little bit better tools and setup, because this is a little bit more complex of a lens. But, well, until then, see ya.